We begin in Nigeria, where Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has commissioned the Redline mass transit train in Lagos State. The train is the first phase of the project, which will run from Agbede to Oyingbo in the heart of Lagos. The train, when fully operational, will run 37 trips and convey about 500,000 passengers daily. The commissioning signals the takeoff of another major infrastructural development in the state's transportation system.
That work for highest number of people, not just few smugglers and bootleggers. The fight is on. We be on it. We're not looking back. Thank God, Lamada as a public sector institution and Lagos State as a subnational government are both strong and constant. Constant reminders that true change is possible. I speak to Nigerians through this podium that change is possible and change we must achieve. Progress we must achieve. It's not about single individual. It's about the highest growing population in the world. Out of every 5 individual black-colored people is a Nigerian. We cannot afford to relax the budget population. We must plan and prepare for it. We must be committed to great value. And this economy, we will grow it, we will feed ourselves out of the penury, and we'll be happy that we did it. Taking a closer look at working on aviation, what is our problem? If it is corruption, we must exterminate it. No matter how hard it is fighting back, no to corruption. We must adhere to our pledge. Patriotism, perseverance, consistency, and stayed focused. The National Transportation Minister is here. It is very critical for your ministry to collaborate further with subnational government.
That was the president of the Nigeria Republic. Now, moving away from that, reactions continue to trail President Bola Tinubu's directive for the full implementation of the Oronsay report, which involves the merging, subsuming, scrapping and relocation of several agencies of government. Submitted in 2012, the Oronsay report on public sector reforms revealed that there are 541 statutory and non-statutory federal government parastatals, commissions and agencies. President Goodluck Jonathan had set up the Committee on Restructuring and Rationalization of Federal Government Parastatals, Commissions and Agencies under the leadership of former Head of Civil Service, Stephen Oronsay. The 800-page report recommended that 263 of the statutory agencies be slashed to 161, 38 agencies be scrapped, 52 be merged, and 14 be reverted to departments in various ministries. However, there have been questions as to the legal implication of the implementation. All right, away from that story to security matters now. Residents of Goningora in Chukun local government area of Kaduna State have blocked the AbujaKaduna highway following the attack on the community by bandits. The attack took place on the night of Wednesday. Several members of the community were said to have been kidnapped and others injured. The development has caused heavy traffic on the road, with many motorists stranded. 2 people, including a member of the Civilian Joint Task Force, were reportedly killed in the attack. Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff has called for the adoption of non-kinetic approach to tackling insecurity in the country. This was during a training seminar organized by defense correspondents in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, where non-military means of tackling insecurity was also discussed. Amading Uyi reports.
Available estimates say an estimated 50,000 people have been killed in Nigeria by the Boko Haram terrorist group since 2002, with another 2.5 million people displaced. Experts say Nigeria stands at a precipice as it now suffers from insecurity along many fronts.
Nigeria, as a diverse and complex nation, faces a myriad of security threats that demand our unwavering attention and concerted efforts to address. From separatism, insurgencies and terrorism to intercommunal conflicts, transnational organized crimes, and the myriad of other security challenges.
As defense correspondents in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, including editors and public relations professionals, engaged with the military leadership on alternate ways to tackle insecurity, Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff says that there is a need to adopt non-kinetic methods because of its proven success rate.
The armed forces of Nigeria, being the key driver in countering the myriad of security threats nationwide, has sustained non-military and soft strategies as a means to an end of these multifaceted threats.
Look at the insurgency, when it is on 100%. The kinetic aspect is barely 30%. So I think there are certain aspects that we need to consider.
Experts present also urge citizens to be patriotic and put the nation first as Nigeria tackles its insecurity challenges.
There must be a nation before you can even discuss it. And that is very critical. Sometimes I find it very hard to understand when I hear Nigerians speaking evil about their country. And we all know as Africans that there's a power of the word. What you see means a lot. We must learn how to be positive about our country. That's the only way we can produce.
Please continue to be on the side of the truth. Continue, even though objectivity now is subjective, but please maintain the tenets of professionalism and ethics of your profession.
It's very rare. Open CNN today, go to BBC today, you will hardly see any report against what is happening in Ukraine that is detrimental to the national interest and national security of the West.
In Abuja for News Central, I am Amadin Uyi.
Still talking security, discipline has been described as the bedrock of the military profession, without which justice will be difficult to achieve. This was made known during the formal inauguration of the General Court Marshal and Parade 1 officer and 16 personnel of the Nigerian Army under the 3 Division accused of various forms of misconduct in the line of duty. News Central's Chizoba Anyongwe attended the inauguration of the Court Marshal and now reports.
This exercise is one of the major calls from civilians to the military in the discharge of their duties, as well as in the face of series of alleged complicity in various violent attacks in some parts of Plateau State. This is one of the latest allegations where the army and other security agencies, those who have the responsibility of protecting lives, were accused of aiding killers and destroyers. They are believed to be sacred cows who are never held responsible for betraying the power they hold in trust. Addressing the trust deficit is what this court martial is expected to handle. This compelling order of the 3-Division General Court Martial was signed on February 6, 2024 by the General Officer Commanding 3 Division, Major General Abdulsalam Abubakar. It is an internal mechanism for trying and punishing security personnel who violate the code of conduct of the agency. After the last exercise by the division in 2019, this is the most recent. Under oath now, the president of the court will strive to ensure justice is served.
It is therefore pertinent to stress that the principle of natural justice, equity, and fairness will be the watchword of the court.
And if the saying, justice delayed is justice denied, is anything to go by, then it is time for this court to prove her mettle.
All prosecution and the accused persons or their counsel should be mindful of these facts and strive to shun all forms of acts such as requests for frivolous adjournment.
In all of these, the essence of this exercise cannot be overemphasized.
The essence is to make sure that the military always uphold the tenets of due process, compliance with the law, and ensuring that personnel always operates within the confines of rules of engagement.
The 3-Division General Court Martial has been adjourned till March 6, 2024 for arraignment of the accused persons. In Jos for News Central, I am Chizoba Anyui.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Right now, we will be taking a look at the legal hurdles against the implementation of the Oronsay report, even as reactions have actually continued to trail President Bola Tinubu's directive for the full implementation of the report, which involves the merging, subsuming, scrapping, and also relocation of several agencies and parastatals. Now, joining us to further discuss this is Elvis Akpobi. He's the Executive Director, Not Too Young to Lead Initiative. Hello, Elvis. Thank you so much for joining us. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me.
All right, Elvis. Now, it is pertinent to note that most of these agencies were created by acts of law. Now, can the president on his own take actions that will lead to these agencies ceasing to exist?
No, firstly, we are practicing a democratic process, and we have different arms of government. We have the executive, we have the legislature, and we have the judiciary. The legislature is saddled with the responsibility of making laws and policies for the executive to, go through with. When I got the wind of that, I read reports of scrapping and all that. Fine, we're trying to, reduce cost of governance and all that, but there are processes that brought these parastatals in place, and I think the president should note that, and I believe that if maybe he forgot those processes, the committee and other persons should remind them. Even the Senate, the National Assembly, they're meant to write to the presidency on the ways these things can be implemented, because we can't continue doing the wrong thing all in the name of using our pen or using the veto power of presidency and all that. It's not so good. For me, it's not a good way to run a government.
All right, Elvis. Now, shortly after the president, approved the implementation of this report, there was a conference on, which of the agencies and parastatals would either be merged or scrapped. Now, what role does the National Assembly have to play in all of this?
The National Assembly, they know that their deliberation at a particular time, the voting and all that brought all these parastatals. So the National Assembly itself should deliberate on this, why the committee should give them reasons why this should be scrapped. Most importantly, when it had to do with reducing cost of governance, at the moment, everybody know that we are battling with economic problem, and every reasonable government should think of ways of reducing cost of governance. So I think the National Assembly the principal officers, they need to meet, they go back to the house and deliberate on it, and they'll be in sync with the executive.
Okay.
And implementation will take place, yeah.
All right, Elvis. Now, can you share with us your take or your view on opinions that the Oronsay report is outdated and does not speak to the current realities of Nigerians?
Yes, for a report that was submitted in 2012, and in 2014, same report was released by Goodluck Jonathan's administration. I think the Buhari administration didn't really give ear to it, but the Tinubu administration, the present administration, they are looking into it. If you look at 2012 till date, it's almost a decade, and a lot of things have come by, and you agree with me, there are a lot of innovations and other needs we have as Nigerians. And let's not forget, too, most of these parastatals that are being scrapped or being made, they have their different. In as much as we want to reduce governance, I don't want politics to come into it. And most of these parastatals, too, they have their own importance. So for me, I would agree that with the popular opinion that the report is outdated, they need to review the report if really the purpose of this whole thing is to reduce cost of governance. I think we need to look at other things around that report.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Elvis Akpobi, Executive Director, Not Too Young to Lead Initiative. Thank you so much for your time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So the Senate has confirmed the appointments of 4 persons: Robert Agbede, Wanka, Professor Murtala Sagagi, and Muslimat Olanike as members of Board of Directors of the Central Bank of Nigeria. This followed the adoption of the report of the Senate Committee on Banking, Insurance, and Other Financial Institutions at the Committee of the Whole on Thursday. The chairman of the committee, Senator Adetokunbo Abiru, said the 4 out of the 5 nominees appeared for screening, while the 5th, Mr. Urum Eke, was absent. Abiru added that the appointment of the nominees was in tandem with provisions of Section 10 of the Act, which required that the president, in appointing them, shall have due regard to 4 representation on the financial, agriculture, industrial, commercial interests, and principle of federal character.
Recommendations. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the Committee on Banking, Insurance, and Other Financial Institutions, after robust engagement with the nominees and being satisfied with their experiences, performances, and academic qualifications, hereby recommend as follows: that the Senate do confirm the nomination of all the underlisted as members of the Board of Directors for the Central Bank, as members of the Board of Directors of Central Bank. 1, Mr. Robert Agbede. 2, Mr. Adetokunbo Wanka. 3, Professor Murtala Sagagi. 4, Mrs. Muslimat Olanike Aliyu, as directors. However, in view of the non-appearance of Mr. Urum Eke for screening for confirmation for appointment as a member of the Board of Directors of the CBN, the committee cannot recommend him for appointment as a member of the Board of Directors of CBN.
Mr. Urum Eke is my constituent, and he made a call to me, and he told me that there's a conflict between the new job he's doing and what he's going to be. He told me that it will be a conflict between the job he's doing now and the central bank, sitting in the central bank, because he's a consultant to the World Bank, to some businesses, private and government. So he informed the governor of Central Bank that he might be declined not to do the job. So this is the reason it did not come. So I support the 4 candidates nominated by Mr. President, because they are very credible people. They are people of high reputation, Nigerians, and the Central Bank needs them at this moment of our economy. So I support that the Senate should go ahead and confirm them without any wasting of time. Thank you, Mr. President.
We go straight to the approval. Will the Senate approve the nomination of Mr. Robert Agbede for appointment as a member of the Board of Directors of the Central Bank of Nigeria? Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you for staying with us. Meanwhile, the United States has said it is deeply troubled by the passing in Ghana of a stringent anti-LGBTQ legislation, which it says threatens constitutional freedoms. The U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller, in a statement, said the bill would also undermine Ghana's valuable public health, media, and civic spaces and economy. It has called for the review of the constitutionality of the bill. The new bill, passed on Wednesday, imposes a prison sentence of up to 3 years for anyone convicted of identifying as LGBTQ+. It also imposes a maximum 5-year jail term for forming or funding LGBTQ+ groups, and the passing of the bill has been criticized by rights organizations and other groups. From July 2022 to 13 August 2022, several districts in Freetown, Waterloo, Makeni, and Kamankwe towns experienced a series of strike actions with civil unrest precipitating a humanitarian crisis affecting the populations. The demonstrations quickly evolved into violence with injuries, deaths, livelihood losses, displacement, disturbance or destruction of businesses and services, aside from other humanitarian consequences on the communities. The demonstrations were attributed to be linked to claims from the population to the government and exacerbated frustrations over the soaring cost of living, with another fuel price inflation in a persisting context of unemployment, economic hardship, and injustice. To discuss this further, I'm being joined by the Vice President, Republic of Sierra Leone, Dr. Mohamed Julde Jallow. Hello, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining me on the news this evening.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, so what is the government doing to help its citizens cope with this economic hardship?
Yeah, well, first of all, you see the demonstrations that took place, the violent demonstrations. These are not demonstrations that were inspired largely by rising cost of living. These are demonstrations that were inspired by the opposition party. You know, so there has nothing to do with economic hardship, because generally, you know, that they have to look for an umbrella, you know, for an umbrella so it was just used as an umbrella. But beyond that, let me come back to your questions.
Yeah.
You see, when we took over, when we came in 2018, when we came in 2018, we have taken a lot of concrete, positive and progressive policy actions, you know, to improve the well-being of Sierra Leoneans. Let me start first with the social sector, because we realized by 2018, so many Sierra Leoneans we are spending, the out-of-pocket expenditure for health delivery was very high. So many Sierra Leoneans we are spending a huge amount of money to send their kids to primary, secondary school. So many Sierra Leoneans we are spending a huge amount of money, particularly on utilities. So when we came in, His Excellency Dr. Julius Marabio said that a campaign on the basis that is going to provide free quality basic education. So we provided basic education for over 2.7 million kids. Today we have about nearly 3 million kids in primary and secondary schools that are not paying school fees, that are not buying textbooks. So we buy teaching and learning material. We have increased enrollment in primary and secondary school over the years. We have dedicated 22% of our budget, which means money that we are designed originally by family members to pay for kids, to buy school textbook, to pay for school, to pay for learning. Those monies now can be saved and be spent on other things. Healthcare. When we came in this country, 2018, the healthcare budget was at 6%. We progressively increased that from 6% to 8% and 8% to 11.3%. What does that mean? It means within the last 4-5 years, we are able to double, triple, quadruple recruitment in the healthcare sector. We employed over 8,000 additional health workers. we are able to spread those human resources across the country. That enables us to deliver infant and maternal health. So that is why in the last 2 years, we were able to reduce maternal mortality in this country by 60%. We topped the record in sub-Saharan Africa. We are able to also reduce infant mortality. So these are some of the things we have been doing in those two areas. When it comes to overall, you know, after COVID, most of the economies, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, plummeted to a very low. So we developed, by the time we were completing our post-COVID recovery program, then the Ukrainian crisis came. So when the Ukrainian crisis came, what you had is essentially increase in energy prices, increase in freight prices, increase in the prices of essential commodities.
So are you saying that the COVID-19 and the Ukraine-Russian crisis is responsible for the rise in the cost of living? Because you actually did say that you've taken positive and progressive actions and have done so much for the population.
No, yeah, it is a factor. It is a big factor, because what you realize during COVID-19, international freight charges went up. So many of those big countries that are exporting countries, particularly for commodities like rice, oil, sugar, wheat, flour, these are the Asian countries. Those countries were blocked. Because they were blocked, people had to look elsewhere for supplies. And those supplies, they came with a very high prices. Of course, then after we are trying to get out of COVID, the Ukrainian crisis came. What does the Ukrainian crisis? It increased freight charges, it increased energy costs, the cost of petroleum product you see also in Nigeria recently. Cost of petroleum prices rose up, the cost of electricity rise up. What I'm saying, for us as a government, we never allowed those effects to be transferred automatically to the population. So we had to move our politics. So we moved our politics from a politics of development to a politics of subsidy. What does that mean? It means we subsidize electricity. We buy electricity, for example, for 14 cents per kilowatt hour. We are selling it for 8 cents for the social sector and 12 cents for businesses. So we are subsidizing electricity. We are also subsidizing petroleum products. We are subsidizing rice. This is a country where no businessman is importing rice and paying a single cent. We are also subsidizing wheat flour. We are subsidizing commodities as a way to reduce the impact of all those high costs that has been generated as a result of COVID and the Ukrainian crisis and the global economy. So we move to a politics of subsidy. These are things we are doing in the hope to reduce the cost of living so that at the end of the day, citizens will not feel the pinch. So government is taking the hit. Because I can tell you, when you look at rice, for example, and petroleum, for example, we have subsidized millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in those two commodities.
All right, sir, you've listed so many things that you've done to alleviate the sufferings of the Sierra Leonean people, you know, and the reforms, the policies that you've actually implemented. So would you say in this case that the actions of the Sierra Leoneans are justified when they carried out acts of public disruptions just to drive home the point that they're making about life being unbearable despite all the reforms and policies?
No, you see, in a democratic space like Sierra Leone, we have ways of engagement. Like, for example, today I engaged the Labour Congress. And the Labour Congress is a routine engagement to discuss matters of national interest. So with the Labour Congress today, we discussed the cost of living. I used the opportunity to brief them on some of the government actions we are taking, particularly in the education sector, in the health sector, in the food production sector, and more importantly, in the public transport sector. And I told them about the subsidies we are providing. I also used the opportunity to tell them the institutions we have created as a way to address social vulnerability in this country. For example, the National Social Protection Agency. So I also informed them the intending things that government intend to do. So this is a country where we have framework for dialogue, we have framework for discussion. So nobody can explain that people take to the street on violence, claiming to become ambassadors of rising cost of living. That is unacceptable. This was done by the opposition. These are opposition people that are driving it, because you don't need violence to send home a message that cost of living is high. There are spaces for dialogue. You have the National Parliament. You have the Civil Society and Government Dialogue Forum. You have the Labour Congress. These are channels that are provided, that are democratic space where we can negotiate and discuss rising costs. But when people took to the street and decide to be violent, using the umbrella of high cost of living, that is unacceptable. And I believe it is not done with all good intention. Because I just listed to you, we increased the budget in government in education to 22%. We increased the health budget. We are now investing in food production. We have increased our budget in the agricultural sector. In the next years, our flagship program is food production, because we realize as a government, we are spending about $520 million to import food in this country, of which $240 million alone is on rice. Okay. So we are investing now in food production, national food production, as a way to reduce our dependency on imports, on importing food, so that we can create a national production capacity. All of this, we believe that we reduce the cost of commodities that are directly linked to the cost of living.
All right, we do hope that the results from the policies and the reforms that you've actually listed out will start to show in due time. But thank you so much, Vice President, Republic of Sierra Leone, Dr. Mohammed Julde Jallow, for joining me on the news.
Thank you very much.
Away from that, an opposition leader in Chad has been killed during a shootout with security forces. Yaya Dillow's death comes after the government blamed him for a deadly attack on the country's security agency. He denied the accusation. On Wednesday, heavy gunfire was heard near his party's headquarters in the capital, Jamena. Dillow is a vocal opponent of his cousin, President Mahamat Deby, who has been in power since 2021. Deby succeeded his father, who was killed by rebels after 3 decades in power. The unrest in the Central African country follows the announcement that presidential elections will be held on May 6th. These elections are intended to return the country to constitutional rule. The president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, says he wants neighboring Rwanda treated with heavy sanctions as the world did Russia. Tshisekedi roundly condemned what he called Rwandan aggression and the theft of Congolese natural resources. He added that Rwanda's support for M23 rebels had striking similarities with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, raising the rhetoric that has been flying between the countries to an unprecedented level. The DRC accuses Rwanda of exploiting its mineral resources in North Kivu, where M23 rebels are active. Thank you for staying. Botswana President Mogwitsi Masisi has cautioned members of parliament against inciting and discrimination against Zimbabweans as the two adjacent countries who are considering to use national identity cards to travel borders instead of passports. Masisi made the statements in parliament when responding to the budget speech. This follows after MPs criticized the government of failing to communicate with them after Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa unexpectedly unveiled the plans during the Kusi Ideas Festival in 2023. Following the response, the administration assured Botswana that Botswana and Zimbabwe had not signed an agreement on the use of IDs for border crossings. In other news from around the world, the Hamas-run health ministry says more than 30,000 Palestinians have now been killed in Gaza since October 7, 2023. In its daily update on Thursday, the ministry said 81 people had been killed in the last 24 hours, bringing the total to 30,035, adding that the majority of those killed were women and children. The number equates to about 1.3% of the 2.3 million population of the territory. The actual number of dead is likely to be far higher, as the count does not include those who have not reached hospitals. Among them, thousands of people still lost under the rubble of buildings hit by Israel airstrikes. In business, the Bakers Association of Nigeria has called off its strike following a discussion with the officials of the Ministry of Agriculture. The president, Mansur Umar, said the union had reached some agreements with the Nigerian government. Umar, in the statement, said some of the agreements reached between the union and the government include the immediate export of 25,000 metric tons of wheat to flour companies for processing and supply to bakers. The two parties also reached an agreement on revising the plan to produce flour from cassava, potatoes and sorghum. Following the central bank's decision to raise interest rates to a record high, Nigeria's stock market witnessed a significant sell-off, raising concerns about its impact on the economy. This development has prompted inquiries from capital market analysts. Notably, all major indexes except for the oil and gas index recorded losses. For instance, the banking index experienced a 7% decline just yesterday, and the premium board was also affected. On the Business Edge show, Nabila Mohammed, research analyst at Chapel Hill Denham Securities, shared her insight on whether the market anticipates any potential changes in the tide.
For the equities market to be topsy-turvy in different times, depending on the climate that we are in. And currently, we are yet to see some results really come out. So one of the things that will definitely spur investor sentiment, especially in the market, or trigger some kind of positive movement, will definitely be results releases, especially from the banks. It's natural for investors to take profit, especially if there has been significant rally. If we just look back at the start of this year, most of the banks recorded significant rally in their prices, and there was some form of capital acquisition, especially for investors. So it's natural for them to want to book profit. And we all understand that once they start to take profit, it means that there will be some retracement in prices. And when dividends are announced, it will translate to higher dividend yields for investors. So in my view, the catalyst that we should expect would be results releases, especially from the banks, which will be accompanied by dividend announcements. And this will definitely spur some sentiment in the market. And we also know that there is the presence of Airtel and Seplat that has that dual listing advantage, especially for investors, and they are still fundamentally sound stocks. So all these put together will definitely drive some form of market sentiments in the market, positive sentiments rather in the market, and it will serve as catalyst for a further increase in the.
All right, now speaking about the Israel-Hamas war, where the health ministry has actually said that more than 30,000 people have been killed in Gaza, we have our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, it's difficult to get information out of Gaza. Now, how certain are we that these figures are accurate?
You're absolutely right. It is getting increasingly difficult for information to get out of Gaza. But it's thought that this total, which of this morning was 30,035 people killed and about 70,475 injured, is pretty accurate. Now, Israel have tried to say that because these totals are from the Hamas-run health authority, that perhaps they could be inflated in some way. But in past conflicts in Gaza, when Hamas-run health authorities have put together these figures, they have been pretty accurate. And the people that get them together, the administrators in healthcare and working for the WHO, tend to be very accurate in putting these figures together. Now, these are only an estimate. And actually, the US have thought that those figures, which we will get together, obviously, when this conflict is over, could be much, much higher. So IDF officials have admitted that this figure probably is quite accurate, and the US State Department assessing that in fact these figures could be even more. Now, we were talking there about the fact that it's increasingly difficult to get information out of Gaza, and to that end, 50 journalists and broadcasters have actually put together an open letter to appeal for more foreign journalists to be allowed into Gaza to be reporting what is happening there. Of course, there are some brilliant journalists within the territory who've been working solidly for the past 5 months or so, but some of them have been injured, some of them have in fact been killed, and some of them have gone missing as well.
All right, Afia, now as the humanitarian crisis grows, there could be another aid lifeline for people in Gaza. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, that's right. The US are considering dropping aid into Gaza via air. Now, this is something that's been discussed over the past few days because the humanitarian aid that's getting into Gaza is not enough. It needs about 500 trucks a day full of aid, and that's medicines, that's food, that's water, that's tents and canopies. But at the moment, there's only about 90 trucks getting in a day, and those trucks are managing to get past the border. Sometimes they are hijacked and taken by people, and then the goods sold at market. So the aid isn't actually getting to the people who so desperately need it. So the US are considering dropping aid into Gaza via air. But the problem with that is that those airdrops will only be maybe 1 or 2 trucks per airdrop. And so it's not necessarily or not anywhere near what Gaza needs. It needs those 500 trucks a day. So that means that, you know, we need UN agencies to be back in there. We need aid agencies to be back in there working on the ground.
All right, well, thank you so much for that update, Afia. In the world of sports, Cameroonian MMA athlete Francis Ngannou says he is confident he can beat Anthony Joshua in their heavyweight bout on March 8th in Saudi Arabia, stating he's been calling for these kinds of fights for 4 years. The former UFC heavyweight champion is set for his second professional boxing bout when he meets Joshua in Saudi Arabia on March 8th after previously impressing in his defeat against Tyson Fury. Meanwhile, AJ is looking to maintain his winning streak after beating both Robert Helenius and Otto Wallin after successive defeats to Ukrainian boxer Alexander Usyk. That's all at this hour, but before we go, let's take another look at some of our top stories. We told you that President Bola Tinubu has commissioned a Redline rail in Lagos State. We also told you that Chadian opposition leader has been killed in a shootout following security agency invasion. Finally, you heard that U.S. has expressed concern as Ghana's parliament passed anti-same-sex legislation into law. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. Do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Darshan Usman.